On this episode, we discuss 2005's The Adventures of Shark Boy and Lava Girl, along with his 2020 pseudo-sequel, We Can Be Heroes. We'll be diving into the relationship between children's imagination and depression, discussing how to effectively communicate mental health with children, understanding your identity, and much more. I'm Captain Nostalgia, and this is the Victims and Villains Podcast, a podcast dedicated to educating and engaging individuals on mental health awareness and suicide prevention through pop culture. Come on in. The water's fine. Shark Boy won't bite. We promise. We have a oddly supersized show for this episode. This started out as a joke between Dan and I about doing this episode, and then I was like, okay, cool. And then somehow along the way, Mark Pettit, one of our writers here, jumped in on this as well. And then because of him, we now have the guest. So he is a man with a family science researcher with a background in adolescence and family therapy. Please help me in welcoming Mr. Bill Stanford.
Howdy.
Oh yeah, Mark and Dan are also here.
Yeah.
Hey.
Bill, are we still friends after this?
No, man. This is the last straw.
I want to apologize in advance. I was so gung-ho about this episode, and man, I watched the movie yesterday, and but you know, some good themes that we're going to get into, so I'm looking forward to that.
I think we want to preface this right up front. All of us, at least I think Dan and I, liked Shark Boy and Lava Girl. Maybe not so much on We Can Be Heroes.
Well, and did you like it when it came out, or did you like it when you were 30?
So I avoided it like the plague, and when Dan was like, I kind of want to do this episode, I was like, all right, fine. So I ended up watching it for the first time New Year's Eve.
Wow. I watched it for the first time last year, actually, almost as a joke, because I had been talking about in work, I want to do this thing. And so one night I had free, I watched it. And yeah, I didn't mind it, especially for the time period. I thought it was fine. It was fun going back and seeing a young Taylor-latner. There was a lot of charm to it that the sequel just kind of missed a lot.
Yeah. There was definitely... I can't say like I'm a major fan of it still, but it does harken back to that time for me when I was like early teens, maybe a little bit younger than that, when I watched the Spy Kids movies and Shark Boy and Lava Girl. And it definitely has that, we were talking how it's like almost like a fever dream. Like it's like you watch it and you're like, was I asleep and also having a fever like at the same time while watching this? But there is still something about it that you just can't help but like, at least for me. Like I still like, I gave it like 3 stars or 2 stars when I rated it, but it's got things that it's like I like, but then also it's kind of a dumpster fire too.
But you'd say the first one, at least, there's something respectably childish about it. Like look, this sounds like something that a child would imagine.
So
yeah,
I guess since we're talking about this movie, and since we're talking about these movies in particular, I'm not sure if anyone kind of felt this way coming into We Can Be Heroes. Did you guys feel like it was kind of meta at all? Because like in Shark Boy and Lava Girl, we have this kid, Max, that is like imagining these heroes, and then somehow in the sequel, they're magically real with like history and like an entire lore behind them.
Yeah.
That was a point that really confused me personally when I got into the sequel, because it skipped, like, there's a huge portion of not only our Shark Boy and Lava Girl now corporeal and real, but there are all of these other superheroes, and they have children, and there's this whole legacy. And I feel like the movie just did not take any time at all to explain any of that, to the point where, Josh, you were the one who told me that the movie We Can Be Heroes was the Shark Boy and Lava Girl sequel. I thought it was a separate movie. I even looked at the trailer briefly, admittedly, but I was like, oh, this looks like almost like a Sky High like type movie. This is pretty cool. And then no, it's the Shark Boy and Lava Girl sequel, which the movie would almost be better if it stood on its own and didn't attach itself to Shark Boy and Lava Girl.
Yeah. No, I mean, like, I knew that going in, and by the time I was done with the movie, I just thought, well, you can't think of them as being related to each other.
Yeah. It makes me a little sad. One, because Shark Boy and Lava Girl's marriage does not seem like a happy one to me. Shark Boy, or he should be Shark Man, but he's still Shark Boy, just seems terribly closed off. I get he doesn't speak, probably because they wanted to maintain that illusion of Taylor-Latner beneath the mask. But he's, even in the first one, he's angry, he's upset. And Bill, with your background in studying family therapy and adolescence, maybe you can shine some light there on a young Taylor-Latner and just the anger and frustration that he feels in that first movie, and how that might translate, because there is no parental figure to help him like navigate these things. So all of a sudden we fast forward seeing him as an adult, where again he's not speaking, he's kind of closed off, it feels like. I don't know. They went in some weird directions with his character.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, there was something almost like sort of like a Freudian or like object relations-y, right, in the first one, where it's like Shark Boy is kind of a flat character. He's just angry, and you can kind of see that. Like, that's I forget the main character boy's name, but it's kind of
Max.
It makes sense. Max. It makes sense as part of Max's internal world.
Mm-hmm.
But, the other thing is there was this like Life of Pi element to the first movie where it was like, is it real? Is it fake? Well, it doesn't really matter. And they just completely ditched that. I think that's kind of what Josh was saying earlier.
Yeah.
What I had described to Josh, and I promise I'm not going to spend this whole time just saying what would have made the movie better. And I do want to get into the mental health aspects of it. But every time Pedro Pascal was on screen, I was like, yes, this is the movie. This is the way. Give me more. And then it would go back to the children, and it's like, this is just no longer working for me. They should have reversed the plot where it was Pedro Pascal leading a team of superheroes to save the kidnapped children. That would have been a better movie in my mind.
Or maybe if he had just found the children and then carried them with him wherever he went.
Yes.
For 2 hours.
Anything that would have given him more screen time, I would have been on board with, because he was great. And I definitely want to comment on that. Between this, Wonder Woman 1984, and Mandalorian Season 2, he's just had a stellar 6 to 8 week period at the end of 2020 with all of this stuff coming out all at once.
And I mean, I don't know if y'all liked it, but he also was in Prospect, which released not too long ago as well, which I thought was very good. But yeah, he's had 2020 has been good for him. 2020 has been good for him.
I'm happy it's been good for some people at least, and we can be grateful for that.
Yeah.
Man, but looking at this movie and how it relates to the original, Josh, I know when you and I were talking earlier, the first one, I mean, it's fair to say it's so much of it is like a fever dream, both figuratively and literally. And I think there's some good messages there, especially if you're watching this movie as a child, which I did not. I was a 28-year-old man when I watched that movie. But I think it brings up a really good point of, and my memory might be a little vague, but it's in the beginning of the movie. Max is kind of berated by the adults in this film, by his teacher of, there's too much dreaming. There's too much, you're not being in the moment and in the real world. And I think the movie goes out of its way to show the importance of dreams and why it's important to have that imagination and be able to go beyond where you physically are able to go.
Well, I wanted to jump in real quick, if I can. Bill, how important is it for the development of a child and even the mental health aspect to encourage the dreams of a child?
I think that we use that word dreams in lots of different ways. And I feel like watching it in our sort of current discourse, when we say dreams, we mean like a lot of times we mean aspirations. But in the movie, when they're using dreams, they're really talking about imagination. Um, and maybe, you know, maybe there's an overlap there between those two, but I would say imagination is incredibly important for children. There's this great story about sort of the beginnings of play therapy, when which is the type of therapy you do with children, which is not, there's not a lot of like, you're not dissecting things or like, hey, well, tell me about your relationship with your mother or something like that. With kids, you're mostly just playing. And the idea there is that the story is that after World War II, there was a psychologist that was watching people process the bombings in London. And, you know, the men would sit in the pubs and they would talk about what had happened, and the women would get together and they would talk about what would happen. And the children would go out in the streets and they would pick up rocks and they would pretend like they were playing, and they would sort of play with them in the street. And that's sort of the origins of play therapy. It was this realization of, oh, children process through imagination, through play. Which is a lot of what we see in the movie too, with, you know, with his parents, and there's the cookie giants and things like that.
Yeah, and even like the villain of his world is his teacher, and kind of how the teacher was discouraging of him. So yeah, there was definitely a lot of that symbolic symbolism of his real world in his imagination, how he's trying to process that, and his probably parents not very much in a happy or healthy relationship anymore, and so just using that escapism to really deal with what was going on.
But you also see that too with the Shark Boy and Lava Girl characters. There's a scene where the two of them just can't stop fighting, and Max is just trying to get a word in edgewise. And up to that point, a lot of what we've seen as far as like Max's home life reflects that too. The very first introduction that we have of his parents as characters are off in the shadows fighting. And so, you know, it really does depict that, you know, this is a form of escapism for him, but I would even kind of dare say that it's this like safe place that he's building up, because he's probably like what, like 10 or 11, like he clearly is a kid that is maybe probably even experiencing some early form of depression because of that home life, and not really understanding how to deal with that. But also at the same time, I believe kids around that age, like in environments like that, can start to believe that it's their fault.
Mm-hmm.
One of the biggest things with the depression that he's facing, and the movie is really such a good representation of that, is that when you have a kid or a teenager dealing with these emotions, they're going to be multiplied because of their inexperience with handling those types of emotions. I know when I was a teenager, when I would feel sad or depressed, something bad would happen. I would have no real tools to deal with that or to understand, the pain is temporary, emotional distraught is temporary. When you're an adult and you have a panic attack, you have 1,000 different ways to handle it. The first being identifying I'm having a panic attack. When you're a child and something like that is happening, you don't have any of those defense mechanisms that you've been able to build up yet. So I just feel that so many things are worse. And I think that I see a lot of people, especially online, saying, oh, well, adulthood is awful. You have to pay bills. You have to go to work. Yes, you have to do these things, and not to say that there aren't people struggling out there, because they certainly are. But when you're a kid, you can have a very charmed life as a child, sure, but you are navigating and figuring out and learning so many things out for the first time. In my mind, everything is so much more difficult when you're a kid in dealing with things like depression, like anxiety, and not understanding, one, that so many others feel these emotions. You're not the only one. And two, there are ways to be able to navigate these emotions and be able to come out healthier and happier but without the guidance of either an adult who can recognize what you're going through and actually talk to you about it, or in some cases, many cases, a professional, mental health professional, anyone like that, it's very isolating. And that's true of any age. But as a kid, if you don't have someone there to advocate for you and to recognize that, you don't know to ask for help. And that makes it incredibly difficult.
Yeah, that idea about having resources or having people, that was maybe the one thing that really frustrated me, particularly about the second movie as I was watching it, was and I recognize that in stories about children, that's a typical plot move, is to take the parents out of the story, and that's what allows the sort of the mystery and the sort of adventure and the danger and things like that. But one thing that was frustrating for me is this idea that self-discovery for children happens when the parents are out of the picture. And I would say, actually, in an ideal setting, self-discovery, sort of mapping of how do I get through things like this, dealing with upset or dealing even with trauma, the best case scenario is when the parent is right there helping to map all of that out, helping to say, to use you were talking about panic attacks, to helping, to identify, hey, this is what's going on. This is how we're going to get through this. That's really the sort of the real healthy situation.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that, Bill. And it's like one of, like, not trying to like bring too much of my past into this, just like knowing, like, growing up, like I definitely struggled with like anxiety and depression, and grew up in an environment where that sort of stuff wasn't really handled, besides just pray it away sort of thing. And so even today, like I still have my struggles, but I can actually get the help that I need from those around me, and not really have it like shied away or discounted by the parental figures or adults in my life, and it's kind of very relatable to Max and the first movie, not really having that support system during that very like pivotal period. Just makes me hope whenever I do have children that I can be a better guide during those times and help map that self-expression and the forming of identity and walking them through their struggles. Because childhood's hard. Like, it's not easy. Like, it's a very emotional time, and having a strong set of support there for you is very important.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to pull something a little bit positive out of the second movie, We Can Be Heroes. There's a scene where Missy, who is Pedro Pascal's daughter, she is going to she's trying to like rally the kids together to like become a unit. It's almost kind of like the idea of a Teen Titans or Young Justice trying to come together on the first mission. And she turns to Wildcard and is like encouraging him in his progress that he's making, because Wildcard is a character that has all of the powers imaginable, but can't actually use them. And so the idea of, it's a kind of like this running gag throughout the entire movie that he is gonna say, heat vision, and he turns into a toaster. And but I took that like that like one little side. It's important to champion the mental health progress of friends and family, similarly to the way that Missy did to Wildcard's progress in finding his powers. And I think when I was younger, the first time that I ever really felt depression was losing my grandmother. I was really close to her. She is the only family member's name that I have tattooed on me, if that tells you anything about like how close we were. And had it not been for my mom, I don't think that I would have made it out and been the same person I am today, because I had someone there to kind of be vulnerable with me, tell me that it was okay to be angry, it was okay to be sad, it was okay to be depressed, like that there were resources, and really championing that along in a really healthy way.
Yeah, the ability of other people to just to facilitate healing and growth is amazing, and she does that with him. That sort of that positivity and that empathy, and then just sort of looking into his kind of where he was at and speaking words of life to him.
I don't know if it was just me to make this comparison, but when I was watching We Can Be Heroes, I was drawing a lot of parallels with Sky High, which just reminded me I need to revisit that movie because it's been so long. But Wild Card to me almost seemed like a War and Peace character from Sky High, like this someone who ends up being a really formidable hero, but is pretty... he's like ornery to begin with, and he's like pretty frustrated, and he's not necessarily a team player, but he learns over the course of the movie, and of course ends up being one of the people who's really able to save the day and help everyone out. I also I love the concept of he has every power but doesn't know how to control them, and the moment where he turns into a toaster was like one of the highlights of this movie for me. I laughed out loud when that happened. One of the few times I did laugh out loud at this movie was the toaster bit. But I think it's important because you have someone like Wildcard not really knowing too much about his past and everything there. It's good to see him get a group of friends and be able to really relate to them and grow with them throughout this 3-hour time period in which the movie takes place, which again is hilarious that we see so much development over the course of 3 hours. But I guess when you're going up against alien space invaders, you're going to learn and you're going to grow as a person in a very short amount of time.
Just for the record, it's only 2 hours.
God, I thought it was 3 when they started. My God. Okay. Jeez. Man, that's a lot. That's not even as long as like The Dark Knight. Like they went through more in less runtime than The Dark Knight. Okay. One of the things that I think is important about this movie, and Josh, this is another thing you and I discussed earlier, was the importance of practicing mental health habits. And I think that's something that the kids kind of learn and have to go through, and being supportive of each other. And if you stop training, and Grandma Moreno has a really good moment, right, where she says, you stop training for a year and look how pathetic you've grown. Being able to keep up with your different with mental health, but also anything that you're practicing or training, if you give up or just have those gaps, it's gonna be a struggle. So you want to keep it moving, keep it going.
Yeah, I could add to that, I guess, a little bit, just that I know how important it is for you to have those like moments of like self-reflection in each day. I know, like for me, like I try to practice mindfulness and be able to sit and for a few moments at least just think about like how I'm feeling when I wake up and what I want to get done for the day. And just I can definitely tell a change in my mood, my habits, and my overall health whenever I don't do that for a while, and I wake up in like just terrible moods pretty much, and my anxiety and depression is even worse than normal whenever I don't take the time to check in on myself. It's very real.
I think taking that time for yourself and having those check-ins is huge about just maintaining homeostasis, because there's so many external factors trying to get in, and stresses and things, whether you're a kid and dealing with school and maybe new relationships and friendships and everything that goes on while you're growing up and learning, or when you're an adult and maybe you're navigating different jobs or whatever it is that you're going through, being able to have that time to kind of center and know yourself and understand where you are and where you want to be going. When you're looking at these, really both The Adventures of Shark Boy and Lava Girl and We Can Be Heroes, there's that theme of overcoming seemingly insurmountable odds. And when you're always at the moment, it feels like you're the least equipped to deal with it. And We Can Be Heroes especially, none of the kids in that classroom feel ready or feel strong enough or smart enough to be able to take on the antagonists in this film, but they are able to come together. And sure, it's Missy is the one who kind of takes over and guides them, and she realizes, her superpower, leading by example. She's able to really convince them and support them, but they're able to come together to overcome these odds, which I think you could say could be very much representative of things like depression, anxiety, any number of these invisible forces that kind of find their way inside that you need to combat, understand, deal with, and move forward with.
Before I go ahead and share my thoughts on this, we're going to take a quick commercial break. We'll be right back. If you or someone you know is listening to this podcast right now and you're struggling with suicide, addiction, self-harm, or depression, we encourage you guys to please reach out. This is the heartbeat of why we do what we do. Suicide is currently the 10th leading cause of death in the United States, and as of this recording, there are 132 suicides that take place each and every day on American soil. And when you scale back internationally, there are 800,000 successful suicides. That is one death roughly every 40 seconds. So if you or someone you know is struggling, you guys can go to victimsandvillains.net/hope. That resource is going to be right in the description wherever you guys are currently listening or streaming this. There you'll find resources that include the National Suicide Lifeline, which is 1-800-273-8255. You can also text HELP to 741-741. We also have a plethora of other resources, including churches, getting connected with counselors, LGBT resources like the Trevor Project, and also veteran hotline as well. Please, if you hear nothing else in the show, understand that you listening to this right now, have value and worth. We get it. Suicide, depression, mental health, these are hard topics, and the stigma around them doesn't make it any easier. But please consider the resources right in the descriptions below, wherever you guys are listening, because once again, you have value and you have worth. So please stay with us. Yeah, I think that's a very true thing, because the scene where they're walking through the hall and they're trying to get to their parents, they basically say something to the extent of, together we're stronger, but apart we fall easy. And I always think of that line from that scene from the Planet of the Apes movies where Caesar takes the stick and he breaks it and he says, "Ape alone, weak." And then he takes a bundle of sticks and he says, "But apes together, strong," and it wouldn't break. And the emphasis on community, especially with us here at Victims and Villains in 2021, is going to be greater, because I think community is something that you need in order to have a positive effect on your mental health, because I think it's important also to have people that are fearless and bold enough to call you out when they see something in your own mental health, or Mark, like what you were saying about just not having those days where you can tell you haven't meditated, and the effects that it takes, having someone to be there to, call you out. And I think the really trusting in others, and that's something that these kids really have to learn over the course of this 2-hour runtime, is really how to trust one another. Especially when you're talking about Missy, because she basically just kind of gets thrown in there. She's the new girl, but yet quickly rises to the top. It's okay, why should I trust this girl? And really emphasizing that trust and kind of getting to see the better parts of it as it kind of concludes.
That was something I really appreciated in the second movie. Was, as it got started, I thought, oh, this is, I was thinking, man, this is gonna be another one of those sort of, I have to find my true self and then I'll be happy and I don't need anyone else kind of movies. And watching them weave in this, like, no, this happens together, was really encouraging, because I think that's the secret. Maybe that's something we're kind of, if we're learning anything in the midst of sort of the pandemic and stuff, is you have to work together. That people don't function as islands. They need their, even if we can't be together sort of in person right now, that sort of concerted work of the community to tackle problems.
Yeah, I was going to say that, like, especially since the pandemic, with the way we're having to do community these days, and it's all virtual or very separated. We haven't really gone to an in-person church service in quite a while, just because it's just, I feel like we have to be super precautious. But that before the pandemic was such a big part of mine and my wife's community, and we're definitely missing out on that. So community is so important. I know that in my own work, my research, my study is about broadening community and help encouraging couples to reach out to others and build the support networks, because we need those. We definitely need those.
Mark and I both work on a project that focuses on sort of relationship enrichment for parents that are maybe sort of on hard times. They're receiving social services and things like that. And but a big module of the program is community connection, and it's talking about, hey, how do you build support, and sort of talking about the importance of having friends that even you as a couple, that y'all take time to sort of do fun things with, and not just that actually is a sort of indirect route for strengthening your relationship, is building these other relationships as well.
Yeah.
Even in the first film, we talked about the creation of Shark Boy and Lava Girl and Mr. Electric and this weird fevered neon dream planet Drool. But, Max does it as a means of escape. We've talked about that, but also I think as a sense of community also as well, because when he's with Shark Boy and when he's with Lava Girl, he feels like he matters. And we see, when we see him at school, yes, he, George-Lopez's daughter kind of has a crush, or there's a spark there. We don't know. We're not going to read into it. But, he's a victim of bullying, and his parents are on the cuffs of divorce. And so, he's just looking for someone that can really resonate with him. And so what he ends up doing is he ends up creating this entire universe of friends. And it just goes to demonstrate how we are created to be communal. We are created to be with one another, and how much we need one another. Like you were just saying, Bill, our strengths come from one another.
Yeah. Yeah. The wedding scene with his daughter was very interesting in the first movie.
Oh yeah, that was
My dad grew up in Mississippi in the 60s, and he'll tell stories about, they used to have these Tom Thumb weddings, which is a play wedding for children. Oh, that's what this is. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely some bizarre choices. And I forgot up until I really started to remember it how the villain in the fever dream is George-Lopez. And then he even comments on that at the end of the movie. I think when Max is describing it, or when they're trying to face things off at the end, George-Lopez is like, wait, I was the villain? Why?
And Max was just like, things got out of hand.
Yeah, I honestly forget what the final resolution of that movie was. I remember the big battle like by the school, and he had to join up with his classmates to defeat him. But I don't know like if that ended up being the real world or if that was another layer of dreaming. Like the movie just takes a lot of strange twists and turns.
Well, and even like, yeah, and I think that gives a lot of doubt to even like the sequel with, we're not really sure if that's a dream world as well, because I mean, if at the end of Shark Boy and Lava Girl, if they were still in his dream world, then that could very well be the universe that was eventually put together, and the Shark Boy and Lava Girl in We Can Be Heroes are just adult imagination, or adult versions of Max's imagination. So, but yeah, I don't know how that's. I think that's stretching it a bit.
No, I actually think that makes more sense. This world makes way more sense if it's the imaginative universe of a child. Like, I'll be much more forgiving of this film if that were the case.
Well, you spend the whole time wondering, where is Max? You know, he's the main character in the first. There you go, Mark.
Yeah.
Max is everywhere.
He is the world.
I don't know. Planet Drool just seems like it's so neon. Like, I feel like that's like, it's like so bright and just intricately designed by a child, and the world in the second one's so like boring and like mundane that it just kind of feels like
he got older.
Yeah, like he got older and he was just like, I just don't care about these characters anymore.
I think we have, and the timeline doesn't match up exactly, but you have like a 19-year-old Max who just ate just a ton of ice cream one night, watched Sky High and The Boys, and then went to sleep. And then had this dream, and that's why Miracle Man is like a dumbed down Homelander from The Boys. And you have these plot lines that don't like coalesce totally well. And my other thought too is the parents in this movie, and Bill, you have children, so maybe you can judge them more harshly than I will. They don't seem to be the best parents, and I think the movie tries to set them up as like, oh, like they're so proud of their kids. Like when their kids are fighting and they're working together, like they're so proud. But they're so proud, which makes me feel that they weren't already proud of their children. Slow-Mo's dad especially, like watching in Oz, he's fighting and being useful. He's like, wow, he's moving so fast. Like, that's incredible. And it's like, okay, did you not love your kid when he was just doing his own thing? Because you're making me think that you didn't.
Yeah. They were, both movies had some cringeworthy parenting, and we've all done it. If you're a parent, I've had cringeworthy moments today, but I'm glad no one's watching them on film.
Yep.
I don't know. There's probably, if we're talking about cringeworthy parent moments, the scene in the first one where David Arquette and his wife just come out of the Cookie Mountain and they're just dressed like people from like Stargate SG-1, just randomness. I was like, the costume design is so terrible.
I really should have researched the background, the pitch, the editing, the writing, the filming of both movies, because I feel like there's a lot there and there's a story to be told. And if I were a filmmaker, I would want to track down all the archival stuff and find everyone involved with the first movie and just be like, tell me what went on during this whole time, because the world needs to know.
How much did Taylor-Latner like go around seeing dream? You do that a lot.
I look up that clip on YouTube more times than I care to admit because it's either so catchy it gets in my head or it's just like a train wreck and I can't look away. There's a lot.
I watched both of the movies back to back on New Year's Eve.
Oh,
the reason being that you need to leave negative stuff in 2020. I woke up this morning with dream stuck in my head.
Oh, no.
You were just preparing yourself for the podcast.
It's he does like a sick backflip during that song and that number, and
he does a lot.
Then he goes on to be in the Twilight movies and make a ton of money. So things worked out well for him.
I mean, not really.
We're talking about you're talking about parents. We were joking about cringeworthy parent moments, and of course, there's that scene where she's in the first movie where his mom is Max's mom is kind of prepping him for the divorce, and that of course is horrifying. You watch that and you just think, man, I'm watching trauma happen. Sort of putting it on him and stuff. On the flip side, I said earlier that I didn't feel like there was enough parental involvement in the second movie, but there's one exception to that, and that's the grandma. Who, and there's lots of research coming out, especially now as we're sort of broadening our kind of understanding of, hey, like there's the nuclear family, and then there's also like lots of other people that are influential in children's lives. But grandparents, hugely important. And I appreciated that they brought that in as, they didn't just pick a random sort of master, the master trainer is actually her grandmother. I thought that was really cool.
That was pretty cool.
Yeah, I basically grew up with my grandparents, and my grandmother passed a few years ago. And anytime I see a strong like grandparent character in anything, Coco is another really great example of the grandmother in that movie. And it's definitely just brings me back and makes it relatable to things that I've been through, memories that I have, growing up with my grandparents. But I love how she jumped right on board with helping the kids like get ready for this next challenge, because she knew it's like you're the future. You need to be ready for this, and come to my backyard where I have a whole training thing set up with like hologram enemies. Apparently, I don't think that's really described either. She was like way too prepared to train a bunch of children, though.
I don't understand why the weeds had to bend at the end when they're escaping. He's like, no, I've got to see what happens. It's just like. Just some flowers kind of move out of the way. And that's, it felt a little extra.
Yeah.
Yeah. There was one note I took during the movie. I was like analyzing this way too hard. And I will say I honestly didn't see the end coming. That was a surprise. And so in the beginning, when they're locked in the classroom and they're like, you have to stay here, and then they have to take out the guards and do this whole escape plan, it's like, man, the people trying to keep them safe seem a lot like the bad guys in this movie. Like they're trying to hold them in and not let them go, and they're kind of prisoners. And then it all kind of makes sense as you get to the end of the movie. So there's a lot of just like weird little strange things like that kind of end up making sense in the end. I did like the like variety of superpowers that we got to see, even though fast forward, rewind, and slow-mo were all just like different iterations of kind of the same thing. But I do really like how it showed the three of them could work together at the end to make one pretty formidable superhero, which just sounds worse. But I like I liked how what they showed them. Guppy, wasn't a huge fan of Guppy. I think she could have been the best character in the entire group. She ended up not being that, and that's too bad. And again, for this being a Shark Boy and Lava Girl universe movie, seemed like she should have had a bigger role and just a better, well-rounded character.
God, she had my favorite moments. No lie, favorite moments came from her. She was the highlight of the movie for me. But Dan, since you went there, I guess let's open it up. This ending was one of the weakest I've seen recently in terms of films. The entire thing to be a training montage. At first, like when they revealed the lady like the head of the heroics to be the main villain, I was like, all right, they just took that Watchmen turn. Okay. And then they threw it out the window. They're like, nope, this was all a training simulation. A happy ending. We're all resolved. I was like, what?
I would never trust again.
Yeah, I didn't put it into our shared notes, but in my personal notes, I wrote in all caps, this whole thing was a training montage. Because, it's like, they're the bad guys. No, they're the good guys again. No, they're trying to save Earth. There's a term in astrophysics known as carbon chauvinism, and it's the idea of Earth being the only planet in the universe. If you're a carbon chauvinist, you feel that carbon-based life forms are the only ones that could possibly exist. And so I felt that hard in this movie when they say, well, Earth needs to be ready to save the galaxy. You heroes need to grow up and go out and save these other planets. And it's like, those planets can't take care of themselves. They can't save themselves. Like, what makes Earth so special that is the planet that you need to go through all of this just to say, okay, now you need to go out into the galaxy and save everybody else? That was something that I kind of took issue with.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to get political, but it almost seemed like nationalism, like, I don't know. There's just a weird undertone to it that was like, okay, this is trending in a direction I don't really care for. But again, I don't really know the intentions behind the movie in that part, but that's just where my mind started to go.
Well, and in a movie that was, I mean, let's be honest, painfully self-aware in almost every other respect, that was a little odd. Also, I didn't like that slow-mo got fast at the end. That was sort of another one of those where I was like, wait, so like, because I thought the whole point here was, no, like, even though he doesn't sort of line up with the way that we think his superpower should work, it's still, he's still a good thing. And then at the end, they're like, now what is it?
Yeah. And then, like, so correct me if I'm wrong, but Missy didn't have any powers.
No.
Yeah, and I don't really get that either. Like,
Power was leading by example. Guys, did you watch the same movie?
No. They're just bossy. She was just bossy. No powers apart from that. I mean, maybe it was to get people together. I don't know. And then you have the question of Ho-Oh, which I can only assume she was named after the Pokemon. Like, there's no way otherwise. But in her whole thing of drawing the future, and then she's an alien spy, and then, well, she's there to help them through this journey. So did she actually have powers? Was she drawing the future, or did she just know instinctively what was going to happen? Or was she manipulating what was going to happen? Yeah.
A little bit from column A, a little bit from column B.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So there are a lot of things unanswered. I would say I would want a third film to clear up some of these things, but I don't want that. This is one universe that I think we can leave alone unless they want to lean more heavily into an authentic, like, Lava Girl and Shark Boy story.
With Taylor-Latner back singing Dream, 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 Dream.
Yes.
In the background, though. He's not Shark Boy. He's just in the background.
Yeah. That would be good. It would be like in Deadpool 2 when they open the door in the mansion and all of the X-Men cast is there, and then they just shut the door. That's what it should be with Taylor-Latner singing Dreams.
He's just like in his living room or in the shower or something.
No, I think we go in a different direction with this, though. We don't just keep piling on sequels. Instead, we have Disney buy the rights, and they make a like a mini series.
Mm-hmm.
Just Pedro carrying the children around in the minivan to wherever they need to go.
Yeah,
already a better story. I would be so on board with that.
Plot twist: he was the Mandalorian the whole time.
Even though there's multiple children, he always refers to them as the child.
Yeah. That would be so good. I want that now. It would be a better use of my time than this entire endeavor of watching this.
I think though, if you're honestly gonna get a third movie, it needs to be as wild and crazy and as bright color palette as the first one. Like that's one of the things that at least the first one was fun, and it just felt like it had so much energy, even when you had some of the more somber moments, because you had so much colors constantly berating the eyes of the viewers. It just kind of kept that atmosphere constantly flowing from start to finish. And I really enjoyed that. I feel like that's one of the reasons I really enjoyed that film. But the next one, it just feels like a dumbed down version of the Avengers. It's so flat.
Mm-hmm. I'd watch a prequel of the first. I mean, there were so many questions I had about like where did he get this aquarium from that he put Shark Boy in? And like even the joke with the planet Drool's name, a planet so awesome that you drool. I was like, I want to hear more about that.
Yeah. I want to know why every time they said drool, I kept hearing jewel and the connotations of that as the smoking device or vaping device.
That would be a whole different movie altogether. And so the actress that plays Lava Girl originally, she came back, right? That was the same actress in Weekend Heroes.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So she had that what I sometimes see with child actors. So you have child actors who like they grow up and they become like a mature, they're like their own person. Like, oh, that's an adult. Okay. Then you have people like Lava Girl who her adult form just looks like an elongated, taller version of her child form. And it's something that I feel like I've been noticing more, especially now in 2020 and now 2021. We're seeing a lot of characters from around the turn of the century in movies show up more and more now in their 20s and 30s. And it's just really bizarre seeing how some of these kids have matured and just grown. And Lava Girl is definitely one of them.
So Taylor Dooley is actually the actress's name, and she did Shark Boy, Lava Girl, Monster Night, and then like just kind of disappeared from the shadows. So this kind of coming back to her to play this character that really made her famous was kind of one of those like almost Rick Moranis moments where like she just kind of disappeared, and then Robert Rodriguez was like, "Would you come back?" I was like, "Yeah, I'm not doing anything."
I would like to see her in more. She would be really well fitted for a movie kind of like Hush, which Josh, I believe you've seen, and you guys maybe as well. But just put her in like a horror movie where she's the lead and she gets to fight back against her assailant and like maybe just improvise with like household like weapons, or just like maybe she's just really smart and she's able to outsmart and outpace the bad guys in this movie. I feel like she would be really well suited to something like that. And we'd get to see more of her acting range, which we did not get to see with this movie. So I would love to see more of her.
Before I go ahead and share my thoughts on this, we're going to take a quick commercial break. We'll be right back. How would you guys like to help us get mental health resources into schools, conventions, and other events? Well, now you can. Simply go to patreon.com/victims and villains for as little as $1 a month. You guys can help us get mental health resources into current and upcoming generations, educate and break down stigma surrounding mental health, suicide, and depression. And you get exclusive content that you can't get anywhere else. And you guys can tell us which Nicolas Cage movie you want us to cover, and we'll do it. All it takes to get started is to go to patreon.com/victims and villains, or simply click the link in the episode description wherever you guys are currently listening or streaming this episode. Pick your tier and get started today. Yes, it's that simple. So quickly select the tier that you want and help us get hope into the hands of the depressed and the suicidal today. if we're staying on Lava Girl for just a few minutes, I think one of the things that I really connected with her character so much in the first film is because the entire time, they're trying to save Planet Drool from, basically blackout and death. But her motivation and to get the planet up and running is equally also trying to find out who she is and her sense of identity. And when a child is going through the developmental stages, that's a word, right? When it's going through the development stages of puberty and preteens and adolescence, how crucial is understanding identity for an adolescent coming into adulthood.
My screen froze out there for a second, so I didn't catch all of that.
Okay, I'm gonna edit this again, so I'm gonna go 5.
Okay.
I think if we're gonna stay on the subject of Lava Girl, her entire arc is really interesting to watch unfold, and I really connected with it a great deal in the first film. And the reason that they bring Max to Planet Drool is to save it from blackout from Mr. Electric, but a secondary mission that she kind of is trying to understand is really who she is and her own sense of identity. And when a child is developing into, from toddler to preteen, teenager, adolescence, into adulthood, how crucial is a sense of identity when it comes to a developing adolescence into adulthood?
Yeah, I mean, incredibly, right? Yeah, and that's why we have that. That's like a motif in stories about particularly adolescence, and Max there is on right on the cusp of adolescence, right? But so maybe it's fitting that he's not quite asking those questions about himself, but he's got this sort of internal part that is asking these questions about herself. And but yeah, I think that particularly as children move into adolescence, they're looking for a framework to put themselves in that makes sense, not only of who they are in a sort of retrospective sense, but in a sense of who they should be gearing towards becoming, right? I don't know, that was a weird phrase. What I mean is that sort of motivates their actions, that motivates, what role do I take in my community? Who is my community? What story am I a part of? And when children have those things, it can motivate them to do incredible things, right? And to be really inspiring. Or it could, if they find their story in a way that, those stories also have, a dark side where you find your community maybe in a story that's really negative or really dark, and a child can really spiral in those moments and start sort of decompensating a little bit. But there's also a level, if I can say one more thing about it, there's also a level at which Max is, you think about his world is kind of unraveling there in that moment, right? We talked about earlier, he's being bullied. His parents I think he's aware even more than I think his parents are willing to admit that he's aware that their relationship's falling apart. And so that's a whole, he's not finding himself in a story that's negative. He's really finding himself without a story. And that's, where a lot of his sort of decompensating comes from that leads to the breakdown of Planet Drool, if you will.
It's interesting. I never looked at Max's story through that lens, and so now I have a greater appreciation for the film, but also at the same time, I think that, you're absolutely correct in saying that, talking about the, I'm just gonna shut up. Oh, you can't see that.
And I think that it does come back to that. The thing that I keep returning to with these films is this idea that parents are a part of this process. And, like it would be a boring story to tell a story about, well, Max was having a really hard time. And then his dad said, hey, sport, let's talk about that. and then he was better. That wouldn't sell any tickets. But like in the real world, in a child's life, parents are there helping, even with adolescence. Most of my research these days is about religious transmission, or how individuals within a family influence each other's faith commitments and things like that. And one thing is that even in adolescence, when kids are like, "Hey, I don't care about mom and dad," parents still have a huge effect on what children believe about their world and about what, sort of these ultimate questions of ultimate values and, and that sort of thing. Parents are still helping create that story with them.
Now, is there ever a point that you find where parents start, I guess let me rephrase that, at what age do parents kind of start exiting the narrative and it kind of becomes a journey of self-discovery for that child?
Yeah. I think that in a way I would say that we never exit each other's narratives, right? That we're always there. We're always, even, when you're older and it's, your parents have passed for a long time ago, you're still kind of interacting with your memories of them. But I do think that I tend to think of childhood as a continuum, or as a sort of process where we talk about when you're a baby, your modem of control is completely external to you. So babies are crying and you pick them up and you rock them, and you're actually sort of regulating their heartbeat for them as you're rocking them, right? They're sort of syncing up with your heartbeat, and that's teaching them to calm down. Ideally you're not doing that with your 18-year-old. But maybe you are. But as the child grows, there's this sort of increasing handoff. And I think, you get into adolescence, that handoff becomes more clear. Parenting changes, the rules of the dynamics change. And that's maybe people notice more when they talk about parents kind of stepping out of the pictures, that the ways that you influence are changing. And then, you get into what we might call like emerging adulthood, which, like the early 20s, late teenage years. Then you really do have more of a mom and dad have less direct influence. It's less I behave this way, or I believe this because mom and dad have told me to do this, and it's more I believe this or I behave this way because this is the choice I've made. But of course, those choices that you're making are always in the context of this is the world that I grew up in. So your mom and dad are still influencing you in that way. And of course, and it might be that you get there and you say, most of my work with adolescents has actually been with children in like a foster care setting and things like that. So sometimes maybe the choice that you're making is I'm choosing away from that, and so you sort of get to determine the kind of the valence, if you will, of that influence. It might be that you sort of look at it and say, as you're getting into emerging adulthood or late adolescence, some of the choice I'm making is actually to sort of not follow some of those patterns, and that, so you get to determine how that influence plays out, I guess.
No, that's really awesome, and I think really vital information. And when Dan and I started piecing together the ideas of doing a somewhat serious episode on Shark Boy and Lava Girl, the idea kind of came to be, if we do this, we want to make this an episode that parents can listen to with their kids and kind of break that ice. And I think that one of the things that we've discovered in doing this podcast, and even some of the nonprofit work we do, is that there is this level of stigma around mental health. And as someone that has a background in adolescent therapy, how important would you say that it's important? How important is it to have parents talk to their kids about mental health?
Oh man, yeah, so important, right? And my dad is a pediatrician, and so we talk about these kind of things. And his phrase that he tells his patients is he'll say, I just realized it's ironic. I'm talking about something my dad said as we're talking about parents talking. But he'll always say the first person to tell you about something is your expert. You know what I mean? And I think that, that's true for lots of things. I think it's, we always talk about having the talk with kids. And I would actually want to sort of alter that language and say, hey, you should have a conversation about those kind of issues throughout their childhood. But I'd say it's the same with mental health, that mental health is a factor that your kid is going to experience, is going to interact with. They're going to talk about it at school. They're going to talk about it with their friends. They're going to see it on movies, right? And I think having those conversations before, during, after is incredibly important. And I think that what you want to do is you want to sort of those conversations should grow in depth as the child gets older. And so I take for a long time I was taking an antidepressant, and I also take some other medications. And my children will come in the bathroom while I'm getting ready in the morning. Dad, why are you chewing gum? Oh no, I'm taking medicine. Well, why is that? Well, my children are 5. And so I'll say, well, sometimes Daddy's brain doesn't quite work right, and so we've got some medicine and it helps with that. And that's really I'm not sort of laying out my depression or sort of putting any burden on them as far as making them feel bad about it. But what I'm doing is allowing for a sort of an idea of, oh, sometimes my brain doesn't work right, and that's okay. That's not the end of the world, and it's also not something that I have to hide from people or be ashamed about. And I think that's the first step to healing for all of us, right, is learning to somehow overcome that shame. And I think parents can lay a lot of really good groundwork for that.
It's okay not to be okay. Yeah. And learning that, I think we always joke around about it, but Disney kind of has personified what I would call princess syndrome, where, we always think that Prince Charming has to be this good looking guy, and beauty's in the eye of the beholder. And we're in this age now where perfection doesn't have to be perfect. Like, it's okay to be broken. It's okay to have those off days. And like you were just saying, Bill, like, it's okay to that, having mental health, bad days or taking antidepressants, it doesn't necessarily make you a bad person. It's nothing to be ashamed of. And I think that we need to find a way to communicate and break down that shame. And I think that parental figures teaching kids that is a great place to start.
100% agree.
I know
think we still have work to do on reducing the stigma, but we can do it in ways like this, where just having human conversations about the way we struggle and the way we have to cope with our struggles. So,
and the way you approach those conversations are huge too. And Bill, I think you laid it out perfectly. Where you answer the questions and you answer them honestly, and you can give some insight into some of these things that your kids may not yet be able to understand, but you're able to lay some of that groundwork. And I used to work as an EMT and on an ambulance. I would see kids, I would see people of all different ages and teenagers, and the biggest thing would be just treat them like they're human, because they are, and just speak with them and listen to them and give them a point of view that maybe they haven't gotten from their parents or even their nurses or their doctors sometimes. Sometimes just that 30-minute ambulance ride between facilities, it says, hey, whatever we talk about, it's like, I can't go talk to anyone else about it, and we don't need to, you can feel free to just discuss, like, tell me what's going on, what's happening. And some of the best conversations I've ever had have taken place in the back of the ambulance. But it's good to be able to open that door and have that open communication. And especially if a kid is feeling depression or anxiety, they're not going to know to put a name to that. And it's up to us and teachers and other guardians to be able to kind of help guide and facilitate that conversation and say, hey, it's okay to not be okay. And it's okay to be able to, there is help. You don't need to just sit with these emotions. There are things we can do. There's conversations we can have, and let's move forward and let's see what we can do, to help you out.
Mm-hmm.
And I think to a degree, we see that with Max, to where he didn't really know how to, what to call what he was feeling, and so he creates Planet Drool. Mm-hmm. And that repression of that creative outlet starts to diminish, and that's the reason why we start to see the plot unfold the way that it does, is because here you have, George-Lopez's character going through, telling him, oh, you're too old for this stuff, it's time to kind of grow up, basically, and not really understanding the reason why he's doing what he's doing and creating these characters and these stories the way that he is because it's a way of coping. And, I think sometimes parents can kind of get so... Parenting, I don't have kids. Parenting is a balancing act from what I've been able to assess from other people. You have to balance good communication between you and your spouse, but you also have to communicate between you and your kids as well. And the reason why we see Planet Drool being such a central part in Max's life is because that balance doesn't exist. It's completely almost teeter-tottered. Where, even David Arquette kind of doesn't remember saying something to his son, and he's like shocked that he didn't say it, that he'd forgotten that he had said it, and he was so discouraging for that. But you need to have that open dialogue between parents and kids, because that's the first step in kind of breaking stigma in homes, because that's where kids are going to feel the safest.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a great rule of thumb that I come back to over and over again when I'm talking with my kids about heavy things, or I'm just talking with people, I'm doing counseling or something like that. And the idea is that, if you're struggling with how much can I share? Because I think a lot of parents are there. I think a lot of parents want, they want to help their kids. They want to sort of give their kids a framework, but they're worried about what's going to be too much. And I would say the rule of thumb there is that self-disclosure should never be sticky. This is something I learned from Karen Purvis. She was a child researcher at Texas Christian University. But I remember her talking about this idea that when if you've ever had someone tell you something and you come away feeling like they left something on you, like they sort of disclose something that's really hard, and you feel like maybe you're supposed to do something to fix it, that's that kind of stickiness. Mm-hmm. And when you're talking with kids, so even as my oldest, my daughter's gotten older, and she's asked me more questions about depression, we'll talk a little more about, what that, she'll say, Daddy, what's wrong with your brain? And I'll say, I'm fine. Sometimes my brain feels sad even when it's not sad. And I know that I'm not supposed to be sad, but it feels sad anyway. And what I'm doing there is I want to not communicate to her that it's her responsibility, that she needs to fix it, that she needs to be worried about it. I think that's something we can do well for our children, is to sort of to open up those conversations in a way that doesn't sort of make them feel like they've got to take ownership of the problem or anything like that. I think that's when maybe disclosure is a little unhelpful, is if, like with Max, where he starts feeling like he's responsible for what's happening,
Well, I guess the last thing I really want to just ask real quick is, are there any resources or books that you would suggest to parents listening of how to effectively communicate what we've been talking about as far as mental health to kids?
Yeah. Two books that come, let's see here. Yeah, two books that come immediately to mind. The first is by Dan-Sigel, who is a huge name in the sort of child mental health world. He's a neuroscientist and a psychiatrist out in California. And the book is called Parenting from the Inside Out. And I'm being a little sneaky here because it bills itself as a book about parenting. It's really a book about you. And it's beautiful. I mean, it's really good stuff about helping you do the thing that you want to help your child do, which is sort of recognize your internal world, figure out what's going on there. I just highly recommend it. The other book is if you're raising a child that's gone through trauma, if you're a foster parent, if you're an adoptive parent, but even if you are a parent and your family has gone through some hard things, a book that I think could be really helpful is called The Connected Child. And it's by Karen Purvis and I think David Cross is the co-author. But it's just one thing I really appreciate about it is it really does a good job laying out children respond to things differently than adults. That they, even though, we've talked about they're in the world with adults, they, sort of are influenced by traumatic events, just like adults are. The way that they process them through like dreaming, through play, through things like that can be different. And the way that they act out as a symptom of trauma can be different too. And the book does a great job of sort of laying out, hey, here's what your child needs. Here's how to sort of engage them in a way that that sort of identifies when these, hey, is this misbehavior, or is this acting out sort of a cry for help, and that kind of thing. So again, that book is called The Connected Child by Karen Purvis.
Awesome. We will provide links for you guys listening to this right now in the descriptions wherever you guys are streaming this episode. But you guys can find us everywhere at Victims and Villains. We're on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and Twitch, as well as Letterboxd. You guys can go to victimsandvillains.net to find more from this episode, past episodes, all of our social media links, movie reviews, and most importantly, our suicide prevention library. But Mr. Mark Pettit, where can people follow you online?
You can follow me on Instagram at Pumpy Skunk, so that's PumpySkunk, and that's also on Twitter. And you can follow me on Letterboxd at MP, so M as in Mark, P as in Peter, Tauntaun. MP Tauntaun, if you want to check me out there.
Bill, where can people follow you online?
I don't have an Instagram account. I have a very boring Twitter account that's I think it's B Stanford 14. So you can look me up there, but it's not going to be interesting.
Dan, where can people follow your video game obsession?
Yes, you can follow me over on Twitter at drock6499. And I just recently started a new endeavor with more video game articles and online pieces and things like that, which will be shared directly to my Twitter. So follow me over there and check out some of that.
And you guys can follow me on Letterboxd. It's at Captain Nostalgia. And some of my movie journey of 2021 is going to be sneaking its way into Victims and Villains Instagram account. So make sure you guys follow that. And until next time, we'll catch you guys soon. We're going to go hang out at Planet Drool, I'm pretty sure.
And dream.
Dream.